My mother thought that she came to the end of the world. She wasn't accustomed to being in a wilderness like this. Furthermore, it was so far away from the church, which she loved to go to every Sunday, and now that was all finished. The house was supposed to be fully furnished, and when they came in a horse and wagon from the train, they noticed someone going across the fields to another house full of all the furniture and things that were supposed to be in the house. Now, my mother thought the house was really furnished, but when she walked in, all that was left was the stuff that they didn't want for themselves. Can you imagine the audacity of people taking advantage of someone like my parents? That's dumb. However, this awful place to which my mother had come became home, and we loved it. We grew up in it, and from the 3 children that came from Pennsylvania, we became 7 little rascals, 4 boys and 3 girls. I think that my mother learned to love it too in time, even though she had all the hardships of learning how to live in this old house. You know, there was just the house and an old barn that was ready to fall apart, and it was kind of a challenge for them to build it up and create a home out of it. I understand that my Uncle John also came to live with us. The house was real big. It had 12 rooms in it with 1 kitchen on one end and another kitchen at the other end. So my Uncle John and his wife and 2 children lived at one end of the house, and my father and my mother with us 3 lived on the other end. You know, I think we had the better end. You know why? Because we had the old-fashioned built-in oven. It was made of bricks or stones or something, and my mother learned to make her own bread in it and knew just how to heat it up by just burning the wood and then pushing the coals on the side and knowing just when to put the dough in, and the breads came out gorgeous. If she had a little bit of dough left over and didn't have a pan to put it in, we went out in the field to the garden, and we pulled off big cabbage leaves. We pulled off the outside cabbage leaves of these great big heads of cabbage and brought them in the house. My mother washed the leaves off, and then she put the little the dough on the cabbage, and the bread. You should see how good it was. It was so good, we couldn't wait. Well, you know, the cabbage leaves burnt, but the bread was delicious. I want to add here also that we had 3 front entrances to the house, 1 to each kitchen, 1 in the center, and there were 2 back entrances. So you can imagine how big the house really was. Even in the old times, they could stretch it. Being that there were 2 families living, the house had to be separated right down the center to where the middle door was a corridor. On one side of the corridor were the rooms that we had, and on the other side of the corridor were the rooms that my Uncle John and his family had. That was all right. Then we had to separate the cellar. Half of it belonged to us, and half of it belonged to them. Well, you know, partners, even if they're brothers, don't agree with each other. So within a few years, my Uncle John and his family moved back. Back to Pennsylvania. My father paid them off. I guess they just couldn't get along. The two sisters-in-law kind of couldn't get along because they accused each other of taking each other's things in the basement. Maybe it was potatoes or apples or something, but there were such little squabbles. Anyway, it was the best thing. They moved away, and we had the whole farm to ourselves then. To worry about, to work with, to whatever we had to do. You might be wondering how the house was really heated. Well, to go with the 3 doors, we had 3 chimneys in the house. And that was kind of a delicate situation because if those chimneys were not cleaned regularly, we had chimney fires. And I mean chimney fires where we thought the house would burn down. But somehow or other, as luck would have it, we were able to put the fires out. Now, you must understand, there was no indoor plumbing. None whatever. We had what we called a little privy outside, or an outhouse. Now, that outhouse was about, maybe 7, 8 feet tall and maybe about 5 feet wide and about 3 feet deep, and it had sort of a bench in the middle, or at one end. And on this bench, there were usually 3 holes. A little hole for the little kids, then a bigger hole for the bigger ones, and then one large hole. And that was our bathroom. Now, this privy had to be situated further away from the house because, and I don't have to tell you why. Well, at night, it wasn't too bad in the daytime. We would run to the outhouse to go to the bathroom. But at night was a different story. Who would want to run, maybe almost a block away from the house to go to the bathroom? That was an ordeal. And we had no flashlights except a lantern. And of course, one of the children was afraid to go by himself or herself. You had to have a partner. So somebody always had to take you to the outhouse in the evening. But as a rule, everybody had a little chamber pot under the bed, which we used at night. Now, you know, we don't do that anymore. We have our indoor plumbing, and it's much easier for all of us. Now, let me tell you one thing, though. Sometimes we said we were going to go to the outhouse, but we didn't. We ran in back of the house, and that was it. That's where we went to the bathroom. And in the morning, my father would come in and say, "Who did that out in the back of the house?" Nobody did it. Nobody was guilty. Nobody told on anybody else because I think each one of us took a turn to doing that. Of course, we had to clean it up sometime later. We took care of the bathroom situation. And now, just as important, or perhaps even more important, is the water situation. We had, when we moved there, we had one well. It wasn't very deep, probably 20 feet deep. Over the well was a hole in the ground, a big hole in the ground, and here I am making circles, with the sides built up with rocks, and then over that there was a little fence-like made of boards. Over that were 2 posts with a little roof over it. Now, through those posts was a heavy, round rod. Now, attached to that rod was a heavy, heavy rope, and on the bottom of that rope was a bucket, usually a wooden bucket. And we used to call it the old oaken bucket. You probably heard the song, the old oaken bucket down in the well. Now, Some people had a handle on the side that turned that post, but as a rule, most of them didn't. All you did was drop down the rope and scoop up some water and then pull it up and put it into a pail and then bring the pail of water into the house. And that is how we had our water. We had to bring it in by the pailful into the house. And if we had any, of course we had no refrigeration, which meant if we had any butter or meat that we had to keep cool, that was dropped down into the cold well water and kept cool for as long as we wanted it, which wasn't too long. We had to use it when we needed it. Of course, the things were put into a separate bucket, and the bucket is what the food was in to keep it cold. We just didn't drop it into the well, into the water. One time, my father had a big container of milk, which had to be kept cool. This big container had a cover on it, and then it had a spigot on the bottom of it. It seems that whoever dropped this big bucket of milk into the well hit the side of the well, and the spigot opened up. Nobody realized it until hours and hours later, when the milk had emptied into the well. Now what to do? The well water was white. We had no drinking water. The only thing that had to be done was to empty out the well completely down to the very bottom, because on the bottom is where there were springs which bubbled up the nice clean water. And that was a very, very big job, because someone had to go down. Of course, as long as we could use the bucket to bring the pails of water and then dump it out, the white water. Someone had to go down and keep scooping until the entire well was empty. And then after they emptied out the white water, the water mixed with the milk, then they allowed the well to fill up from the bottom. That was a very big job, and one which was dreaded. So we had to be very careful, whoever dropped this big bucket of milk in there, not to bump the spigot against the stones. Otherwise, the same thing would happen.